There we go. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City Council of the City of Falls Church on January 28th, 2013. If you please rise and pledge allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. If I can please have the roll call.
Ms. Berry? Here. Mr. Duncan?
Here.
Mr. Kalin?
Here.
Mr. Pepe?
Here.
Mr. Snyder? Mr. Snyder's absent. Mr. Charter?
He's over here.
And Mayor Baruch.
Here.
Thank you, Council.
If I can get a motion to adopt the meeting agenda, it's been revised as of today.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt the revised meeting agenda for the January 28, 2013 meeting.
Thank you. If I can get a second.
Second.
Thank you. That's Mr. Duncan on the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the meeting agenda is adopted, and what had gotten dropped out is the closed session. And we don't have any proclamations. Is there anybody here to be sworn in for new boards and commissions? Ms. Shower, are you aware of anybody being sworn in today? Okay, not seeing any. We are on to receipt of public comments, and we have a formal presentation by the HSAC and their annual report. So Ms. Christine Simpson, who's the chair.
Good evening, Council. I'd like to introduce two groups to you tonight, actually. The first is the Human Services team here at the city that make up the city staff. First is Sue Richter, they're sitting in the back, and you probably remember her of Employee of the Year fame. And then Leslyn Barrow, who's our Human Services Specialist, and it's because of her hard work and big heart that the most vulnerable citizens of the City of Falls Church really have access to the services that they need. The second group that I'd like to introduce is the Human Services Advisory Council, and we have here representing the HSAC is Christina Crockett and Kristen Simonson. And this group does a wonderful job of advising, giving us their wisdom, their knowledge, and to really guide the human service activities in the city. And they also manage the community service fund process. So I'd like to introduce Kristen, who will give their annual report.
Good evening. Tonight I'd like to provide a brief summary to the Council of HSAC's activities over the past years and highlight a few key points from our annual report. First, I'd like to thank the Council for the annual appropriation it provides in support of the Community Services Fund and highlight some of the good work of our grantees. As the Council may recall, HSAC reviews the grant applications each year and provides recommendations for the grant amounts. We currently have 7 grantees providing incredibly important services to our community. With the help of HHS staff, HSAC monitors the progress of our grantees. And just to provide a few examples, we're very happy to report that in FY13, our funds have supported emergency food assistance for 36 of our families, operation of the winter shelter, and home modifications to improve the safety of 60 of our senior citizens in Winter Hill. Looking forward to FY14, HSAC just reviewed grant applications, and we will be submitting our recommendations for grant amounts for the Council's consideration. And we look forward to another year of our grantees working to improve the lives of our residents. Next, HSAC would like to thank the Affordable Housing Work Group for its tremendous work in drafting a policy for our city. We also thank the Council for supporting the work group and considering the draft policy. And recently, HSAC did submit formal comments on the draft policy for the Council's consideration. We look forward to the Council's decision and to supporting future opportunities to promote affordable housing and expand affordable housing solutions within our city. Next, I'd just like to highlight some of the great work that our city staff is providing in supporting Falls Church in-home daycare providers and the many families that rely on their services. At our request and to dovetail with upcoming changes in the city, in the child care ordinance, Sue Richter conducted a survey of all of our in-home daycare providers within the city, and overwhelmingly the response was that our providers are happy with the support that they receive from the city and also from the Fairfax County Office for Children. City staff have also excelled lately in bringing domestic violence awareness to our residents. Last year, HSAC provided several recommendations to Nancy Vincent on ways to improve awareness in our community. And with those few comments, Leslyn Barrow took our ideas and ran with it. As one example, Leslyn compiled a list of phone numbers to connect people with existing domestic violence resources that are already out there. We attached this list as a reference to our report, and Leslyn has also distributed this list throughout the city to the police department and the schools, and we're very happy to report that this list has already proven itself to be a very valuable resource. Finally, HSAC would like to take the opportunity to thank Nancy Vincent and Leslyn Barrow and Sue Richter and all of the HHS staff for the exceptional support that they provide to us throughout the year. None of our accomplishments would have been possible without their help, and we're also grateful to their clear commitment to serving our fellow citizens. HSAC, of course, also thanks the Council for its ongoing support of our work, and we look forward to working with everyone in the upcoming year on promoting and improving human services within our city. And with that, I'd like to ask the Council if there are any questions on our report.
Thank you very much. Council, any questions? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 3 of your report, you refer to the rent relief program and note that 3 residents benefited from it. Wondering just what the historical numbers are there in recent years. Is that a lower than typical number, about the same?
I believe that's about the same, but Sue might be able to address that better than I can.
Okay, thanks.
The rent relief program is for eligible seniors and those that are totally disabled. It is for renters. It's a one-time assistance. Many years ago, we had sometimes 20 to 30 people receiving that assistance. Through the years, as the rents have increased, we've seen less people applying for the assistance. Last year, I looked at this. The rents have gotten to the point where these people are on fixed income, Social Security, and they can't afford to stay in those apartments living here in the city. Many of them have passed on. Others have moved with their children or into nursing homes. So our numbers have gone down, but the 3 that get it this year, we're very pleased and appreciative.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I wanted to note Craig Cheney's name pops up in your report a couple of times, and just take the occasion to congratulate him on being appointed to the school board. I think that must mean that maybe he'll be leaving HSAC. Is that right?
I believe Craig has thought about staying on if he
Okay.
can, insofar as
He is allowed to. Okay, all right. I didn't know. I just wanted to congratulate him for that. And thank you for your thoughtful deliberation on the affordable housing issue. I was able to attend a couple of your meetings and, was impressed with how you wrestled with it, and look forward to reading your report on it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Other council members?
Well, I just want to thank the group, both the volunteers and the staff. Of all the committees I've worked with, this one actually holds meetings and gets things done and tackles some tough issues. I see a passion with this group that I don't see with all of our volunteer commissions. I wish everyone was committed to the causes. And this group does it not because they have any vested interest like a lot of our committees, but because they're passionate about the cause and want to provide this kind of help, particularly on things like the housing issue, where they weren't afraid to step in and make the comments they thought were correct, and I hope we listen carefully. So thank you.
Thank you. Other council members? All right. Thank you very much, and thank you to the committees and all of our board and commissions for their work. Thank you. That takes us through all the formal presentations. I've got a few speaker slips. The first speaker slip that I have is Ms. Avery Levette. And if you would please provide us your address for the record, and you've got 3 minutes.
Right here.
I'm Avery Levitt, and I live at 504 Meridian Street, City of Falls Church. It's my first council meeting. I've been in the city as a homeowner and citizen of the city for over a decade now. I have 2 young girls. I have a second grader at TJ Elementary, and I have a daughter who will go to Mount Daniel as a kindergartner in the fall. I wanted to just give my support on behalf of our family and many of our neighbors for the video cameras being installed on the school buses. Standing out on Lincoln Avenue, watching the school buses for 2.5 years, on a regular basis, I watch cars speed right past the stopped buses. The children have a very difficult time crossing Lincoln Avenue. There have been some very close calls, and I would love to see a little bit more safety and to people be more mindful of the children and the buses. So I was just putting my support out for that.
Great, thank you very much, and you're always welcome to speak to council. All right, the second speaker slip that I have is from Mr. Robert Lejeunesse, also on video enforcement, and you feel free to speak now or when we get to the item, whichever you prefer.
Hi, Robert Lejeunesse, 409 South Virginia Avenue. I just wanted to express some ambivalence about equipping and entrusting the school system with enforcing traffic violations. I have a child on one of those buses and spend a lot of time around the school buses, and I also get stopped on my bicycle behind school bus, and I've never seen anyone disobey. That's not to say it doesn't happen, but to read that it happens 20 times a day is just beyond belief to me. And so before you base any revenue projections on that figure, I would encourage you to seek the input of the police. I'm shocked by the silence of the police on this matter. I haven't heard of them endorsing it or not. And I'm also shocked by their absence on the streets. Why aren't the police enforcing this if it's so common? I know they can't be everywhere, but maybe they could do an assessment for us and to see if this is truly an issue, the issue that the anecdotal evidence suggests to us. And then if the police are the origin of the request or the bus drivers are the origin, that's one thing. If the request originated from the vendors, I would also require a little more investigation of that. And then finally, I would want to investigate whether or not there's adequate legal service. The context mentions at both C&I the operator of the vehicle, but the summons is issued to the owner of the vehicle, and you may, be convinced based on the traffic light videotaping that that's not a problem, but it just strikes me as a potential conflict. So I would encourage you to seek the assistance of the police in considering this measure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe some of those issues are going to be discussed during the staff report as well, so thank you very much for your comments. Those are all the speaker slips that I have. Are there any other members of the public that wish to address council? All right. Ms. Bichette, if you'd summarize the written comments we've received.
Council, before you, I have revised the packet. You received a couple more letters since I put this out after 5 o'clock. Eric Johnson at 306 Grove Avenue does not believe an unarmed security guard at the schools will add any meaningful protection, and at a time of limited budgets, he believes the expense is unnecessary. Lisa Young at 200 Brook Drive supports the ordinance to install video cameras on school buses, and at least 3 times a week, oncoming traffic does not stop when the bus is out there. Amy Ballard Wood at 514 South Spring Street asked the council to consider changing the schedule for the first budget hearing because it takes place the week of the school spring break. Peter Seitz does not believe that the $200,000 request from the schools for a security fence around the middle school and high school should be funded. He believes instead the money would be better used for additional teachers. And those are the written comments you've received.
Thank you very much. We are on to business on the agenda. Or actually, sorry, we are not quite yet. Sorry, we are on to the city manager's report to city council. Mr. Shields.
I'll have a brief report tonight. Just 2 items. I wanted to note that the council several months ago, adopted or endorsed the Green Power Community Challenge. That's an EPA-sponsored program whereby where the city sets a goal to citywide for all of our electricity consumption to be, our initial goal is 3% from renewable sources. Homeowners right now and businesses are eligible to sign up to purchase green power and count towards our community goal. The city has already done so. Soon throughout the community, I think you will start to see signs popping up where businesses and homeowners who have joined this program to purchase green sourced electricity will have a sign in their yard to note that and encourage their neighbors to do the same. The typical cost is about 43 cents a day for your average homeowner to have renewable electricity. Now, what that means is that the electric provider, Dominion or whoever it might be, goes out and purchases that amount of green power, and it goes onto the grid. Those specific electrons might not be getting to your house, but the whole purpose is to build the market for renewable electricity. And we can do our part. As time goes on, we'll be able to measure our progress against the goals that we've set and be able to report out on that. But I just wanted to take the opportunity tonight to plug that program and encourage people to go to the city website at www.fallschurchva.gov to get more information about the program, about how they can sign up. Secondly, with all the inclement weather that we're having, I just want to give a note about all the ways that people can go to get information about closing and delays. This is an area where schools typically make their decision independently and post and get their information out independently from the general government. For the general government items, I encourage people to sign up to Falls Church Alerts or follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or call the Citizen Information Line at 703-248-5200 to get information about closings, late openings, rec and park programs, and that type of thing. And then lastly, with the big swings in temperature, we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but it is water main break season, and we expect more over the course of this week as we have the very dramatic swings in temperature. And if you do experience low water pressure or a water outage, please call 703-248-5071 to report, and that's, of course, a 24-hour number. Again, 703-248-5071 to report it, and our average restoration time is about 4 hours. And bear with us if you do experience a water outage during this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Council members, any questions for Mr. Shields? Okay. Thank you very much. We are now on to business on the agenda. Ms. Bischoff, if you'd read the first item.
Before you, Council, is TO 13-03. This is a revised version. Ordinance providing video enforcement of law against passing stop school buses with the addition of Section 26-20, use of photo monitoring systems to enforce law against passing stop school buses, penalty.
Thank you, Ms. Bichau. John and Wyatt, if you can both do the staff report, and if you can also touch upon the points that Mr. Lejeunesse asked about and inquired about as well.
Sure. Good evening, Council. The revised ordinance should be in front of you. The main point of this ordinance is to authorize adoption of a school bus camera program to basically record violations by drivers as they go by the flip-out stop sign that's on the side of city school buses. As noted in the staff report, during a 3-day period in November, the city's school bus drivers recorded 60 violations over that 3-day period. Now, the proposed changes to the ordinance that are in this red line are technical changes that really do two things. They first make it clear that the costs incurred by the city in administering the program will be paid out of the proceeds of the program and before any transfer to the city school system. And secondly, there are some technical changes that I can walk you through. Starting at line 9 through 11 of the staff report, again, it makes clear that basically the city's general fund amounts equal to costs incurred by the city in administering the video enforcement measures will be credited. And then we go on to the actual ordinance itself. This is at line 86 through line 88. We have deleted that last sentence because it imposes really a technical recording requirement that is not in the Virginia State Code. It's really surplus, it's not needed, and therefore we've recommended it be removed. Moving further down at line 106 to 107, again, this is getting into really the specifics of how these cameras will be installed. That's not really appropriate for an ordinance. It's more appropriate for a contract that's negotiated at an arm's length deal, and so we've recommended that be removed. And then finally, at starting at line 115, this gets into, again, compensation of the vendor. That's not appropriate for an ordinance. That's something that should be in the contract that we end up negotiating through the public procurement process. Finally, at lines 186 to 187, it again clarifies that the city's general fund will be credited with an amount equal to the costs that it incurs in administering the program. With that, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Shields, did you have anything to add specifically on the issue of staff recommendations overall and the police department as well?
Just a couple of points. The city police department has been involved in the drafting of this ordinance and been involved in the discussions. The police department supports this program. We do note that there is no locality in Virginia that has yet administered video enforcement of school bus violations, and so we will be a leader in this. In Photo Red, just as an example, our contract is the go-to contract now around the state as one of the better negotiated contracts. We anticipate that people might be looking at us again as we procure these services, and so it's something that with our police department staff, we think we have some ability to administer the program well. Lastly, the police department does enforce these violations now. It is difficult to be everywhere at once, and these are often difficult violations to catch people in the act on. But while we are moving forward with this program, we do issue citations for this frequently.
Okay. Thank you. Questions before we take a motion up? Ms. Berry?
I'm sorry, these are technical questions, or logistical questions perhaps I should have asked during work sessions, so I apologize. On line 10789, just for my information, how long are images stored? Do you have any idea? Photo images stored of license plates or whatever.
Right. My understanding is they're stored until the violation's been issued and that there's a court hearing. Once there's been a determination of guilt and appeals have been exhausted, they're then destroyed. They're not retained.
Okay. And then my second question was on line 184, 85, 86, referring to the city treasurer then remitting to the school division the fine amounts, absent the administrative costs. How often would this happen? Is this something that the schools would expect quarterly or once a year? Or, I mean, I'm thinking for their budgeting purposes.
Yeah, I would certainly. I'd want to defer to the city police department, city treasurer, as to how frequently that would be done.
Other questions? Mr. Duncan?
Thank you. Just to be clear, the needs survey for this was generated by the school bus drivers, not by the vendor. That was a specific question.
Yeah, that's correct. It was generated by school bus drivers who observed these violations.
Okay. And there's no additional police data, but we are fairly confident that the school bus driver survey is representative enough to warrant going forward as we are, obviously.
Yes, we are, Mr.
Okay. The other question, could you explain the distinction between the driver of the vehicle and the, person to whom it is registered, whose tag is shot? Because what happens if, somebody borrows my car and runs past a bus? Do I get the ticket, or the camera is not able to identify the person driving the car, correct?
That's correct. As the registered owner of the vehicle, you would get the ticket, but you would have the ability to come into court and contest it and, put on evidence that you, in fact, were not driving.
Okay, thank you. Other council members? Mr. Carter?
Thank you. Approximately how much does the vendor get on this? Is it a percentage of it? Is it a flat fee for each violation? Do you have any idea how it works?
Well, as Mr. Shields mentioned, we're the first in the Commonwealth to move towards adopting this. That's something that we will negotiate very, very closely to ensure that the city gets the best deal, so to speak, and that we are cost neutral. And so, we'll look at you identified two ways, is it a percentage or is it a fixed fee, but we're certainly going to look at that very closely as part of the procurement process.
And how does it work on the red lights?
It's a fixed fee.
It's a fixed fee with red lights.
So we pay a certain amount for each violation that gets issued? Does the state law, what's that?
We pay a fee to the vendor per intersection, and so it's not based on the violations for photo red, and that's specific in the state code. And I'm reading through this code section to see if there's a similar provision, and I don't believe that's the case. So we will have latitude to negotiate a contract.
Did I also remember seeing a Supreme Court case in Virginia that required, like, the local police department to have some involvement with each violation, like to have them review a violation before it actually is issued?
Yeah, the reason the police department is deeply involved in this is we need to have a uniformed officer issue every citation. That's under the law.
Gotcha, okay. And one last, just to make sure I understand correctly, the ordinances you've written, all the funds, essentially the net proceeds entirely go to the schools, is that correct?
After ensuring that all the costs incurred by the police and other city employees are, been reimbursed, yes.
Yeah, net, so,
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's all. Any other questions? I've just got some quick questions. One is more of a comment, but is that what we're looking for here is change in behavior, not revenue stream on this. And this goes to some of the comments I made before, that we need to view this as being revenue neutral and hopefully declining, but we want to make sure the program pays for itself. And if it doesn't, I would still support the program, but we need to factor that into the budgeting. So as you're doing your contract negotiations, I think that's going to be very helpful. And two, if we can just be on, since we are going to be on the cutting edge of doing something like this, which again, I support, but if we can also work with the police department in those contract negotiations. For example, I think we had some lessons learned with the red light cams and how they were operating and flashing lights into people's houses. I'd hate to have a situation where we're having flashing lights go on as other cars are driving by and create other potential hazardous situations for folks on the other side of the street that are passing by. So if we can just continue to make sure that the police department is involved in how those are set up and anticipate some things that could come up and write those into the contract as well to the best that we can. And one technical question that I had is, I believe that red lights in Virginia, points do not go onto the driver's licenses for the reasons that Mr. Duncan was getting at, that you can't tell who was necessarily driving the vehicle.
That's correct, and it's also the red light statute. That's correct. It's also true of this bus enforcement statute. It doesn't. Points are not accrued on anyone's license as a result of a violation of this ordinance.
So it's a fee.
It's a civil penalty.
Civil penalty. And what is the penalty? It's $250, is that right?
$250, that's correct.
And is that the same for red lights as well?
No, red light is limited by state code at $50 per violation.
Okay, great. Thank you. And is there, under state, let me ask this, Is there any point where it becomes an issue if you're a habitual violator of this provision?
Not currently. I mean, that's, let me put it this way, Mr. Mayor. There are other avenues of enforcement besides this that the police they have current authority to do. The challenge is, under those criminal provisions, is, having a police officer who's there and happens to witness it is the challenge. Currently, if someone violates this, multiple times, it doesn't spill over, unfortunately, into, a reckless driving conviction, for example.
Thank you very much. Any other questions before we take up a motion? Okay, if I can have a motion, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adopt TO 13-03 as revised.
Thank you. If I can get a second?
Oh, go ahead. Second.
It's Ms. Berry on the second. I'd like to open this item up for public comment. Are there any members of the public that wish to address this item? Mr. Lajeunesse.
Just a final comment that came to mind as you're discussing this data collection would be just that. You would then have data as to where in the city these violations are taking place. And if people are habitually violating this, then the police could target those areas. So that's another upside of collecting this information. Thanks.
Thank you. Other public comments? Mr. Sharp.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I do want to say that we received tremendous cooperation from the police department, from Mr. Foster and other members of the staff in getting this ready, and very, very pleased that you're about to support this ordinance. And we still have a few hurdles to get through with engaging a vendor on our side, but I look forward to getting that accomplished speedily, and hope that we can get this going. There is as I think it was probably clarified for you before I arrived, but it was 60 violations over a 3-day period, so an average of about 20 violations were observed per day, and hopefully we'll be able to see a downward slide of those, and but still a net revenue from those that are experienced.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other members of the public that wish to address this item? Not seeing any, I'm going to go ahead and close this.
No, I was waiting for my comment.
Yeah, they'll come. You're not a member of the public, Mr. Kalin. Take a deep breath. I'm going to go ahead and close this item to public comment and open it up, as I always do, to council member comments. Mr. Kalin.
Please.
You actually took my comments, and you're part of the presentation. Absolutely support this. The point being, and just to repeat what the mayor has indicated, this is really behavioral, as much as not really for many of us a revenue issue. It really is making, the $250 is intended as a deterrence, and if you're a multiple offender, I would think most people would feel the dent after a while. And if they don't pay the fine, there are probably other serious ramifications for that. And I would expect, or hope and expect, that actually the revenues dwindle because people don't do it.
Right.
So it's really not to be a revenue-generating activity. That's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Kalin. Other council members? Thank you very much. If I can have the roll call, please.
On TO 13-03 revised, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalin?
Yes.
Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Tartar?
Yes.
Mayor Brook?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The next item before you, and I've lost my agenda. Here it is. Next item before you, council, TO 13-02, ordinance to amend the FY 2013 budget of expenditures and revenues of the general fund and the school board operating budget by appropriating grant revenues, contingencies, and school board fund balance.
Thank
On
you.
second reading.
Thank you. Richard. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday, Council. You have before you for second reading a request to amend the FY13 budget for the general fund, to appropriate grant funds, and to appropriate the use of contingency funds. You are also requested to amend the school board operating budget by using school board fund balance. We've discussed this at, I believe, 2 work sessions, and again, this is second reading, but I will be happy to answer any questions that may have arisen since then.
Council members, any questions for Mr. Alejandro? I had one question that a member of the public had reached out to me about regarding the report. I believe it was line 69 through about 79. That language to the staff report, I believe, was added as a result of the discussions that we had during first reading and the work session. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. But the actual numbers in the ordinance were based on the amendments that were made from the dais, right? Correct?
Yes, lines 59 through 67 are the individual items. The total amount is $782,000.
So, and basically, nothing has changed other than the staff report between the amended that we took from first reading until now.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, Council? Ms. Berry?
I had a procedural question, and that is, we had asked that there be the written recommendation to the City Council with regard to the security fence. And is this part of is this an amendment to, is this part or attached to, or is it an integral part of this document that we're looking at? Because I mean, I don't see it attached or...
It was discussed at the work session, and a copy of the chief's written recommendation in favor of the fence was part of that work session discussion.
Okay, I'm sorry, I don't recall that it was specific to the fence. I thought it was specific to security measures, but if it is specific to the fence and I just misunderstood, that's fine.
I think Ms. Berry, if I can, on this, I believe what was discussed at the work session is for further follow-up conversation between the police department that was supposed to include the fire marshal and also the schools in their discussions. So, and I believe that meeting did happen, so perhaps Mr. Shields can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so since the work session, our members of our police department, the fire marshal actually was not able to attend the meeting, but due to scheduling problems, but met with school staff, walked the site, discussed the fence. The recommendation that the chief provided to the council earlier was in favor of the fence. It did note that for a determined attacker, a fence is not really a deterrent, but what the issue with the fence is the population that just moves through the campus on a daily basis, and the fence would address that. So there will be ongoing coordination on this, and of course the broader coordination that occurs every day and is enhanced now between the police department and the schools on overall security matters.
Thank you, Mr. Shields. Ms. Berry, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I recall that conversation. I think there's some members of council that want to make sure that this $200,000 is deployed in the most, expeditious way possible, and we wanted to make sure that the fence was certainly the first responders' reaction of choice. Do we have a sense, and this is probably not part of this ordinance at all, as to how quickly that $200,000 is going to be deployed to put that fence up?
Let me look to, I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. This is Sevi Padilla, who is in charge of school facilities.
So we're still working on the design of this. Obviously, since we are in Fairfax County, I have to get the approval from their fire marshal. We are working with the city's fire marshal, which he wasn't able to attend on Friday when we had the meeting. I'm hoping to get with him this week, and this week he and I can actually walk the site. But we also have to get approval from the grad center next door, because the way their building is designed, our fence sort of tails into a corner of their building. I've already met with their reps from Charlottesville and Blacksburg. They just happened to be all on site a week or two ago, and they've got our proposal, and they're talking to their higher ups at their respective schools, and then we'll find out what they say. If they don't agree to it, then we'll have to come up with a slight backup plan to that, but it shouldn't affect the whole deploying of the fence. We already have the vendors getting us the quotes, and hopefully we'll have those finalized in the next couple of days.
Thank you. Any other questions? I had one follow-up question. This touches upon the Fairfax issue. Mr. Shields, do you know if Fairfax police or fire were also in support of this notion? I don't know how much of an involvement they would have had other than site plan approval. Sevi, yeah, just if you don't mind coming to the mic.
We have not spoken to Fairfax yet. We were trying to iron out the details if even this was feasible, knowing that the possible referendum, or the referendum when it comes up and we have the land swap, assuming everything passes, that it will be our jurisdiction. So we want to make sure it's actually going to, mesh with what we want as a city before we can even, move forward with them. I don't see it being a problem because we're not right up on the top of the highway, and we're going to do other things. And Tom Player, our fire marshal, all of the recommendations that he was making and the concerns that he had were based on Fairfax's code, so that we're meshing with what they're going to say anyway.
But outside the site plan issue, do we have a sense of what Fairfax, as far as their police department, thinks about the utilization of a fence?
We have not reached out to them. We did reach out to them when we put the initial gate that's right in front of the Mary Ellen, right, when we put that in, and they were fine with that. So.
Right. Other questions? Ms. Berry?
Thank you for providing all this information. I guess I'm unsettled that there's still so much jurisdictional uncertainty about this, that conversations that should have happened in advance of this coming to council haven't. What if this fencing costs more than $200,000? I mean, how sure are we that this is the right number to achieve that which the schools and certainly all of us feel, is important to keep, school children and faculty safe?
Well, I've already gotten one quote, and the first quote was well under $200,000. This is a follow-up quote to make sure that number was accurate. The company that gave us the initial quote was a fence company that we've used for many, many other projects, and we don't doubt their numbers. They're always right on target every time they give us a quote. So that's where we're coming with the number.
Other questions? Mr. Duncan?
Well, was that company different from the company Securitas that gave you the initial walk around to talk about the fence?
Well, no, Securitas, when they walked around, obviously they're not a fence company, but they,
okay.
yeah, so Securitas was just proposing that would be a good option for us.
I knew that. I just wanted to get that on the record because I had been asked by a couple of people, did the company that proposed the fence, bid for the fence? The answer is no. Thanks.
Other council members? Mr. Tarter?
I've got a question. Is there a problem with people just sort of wandering through campus? I mean, this kind of random...
All the time.
Excuse me?
All the time. All the time.
Where are the people coming from?
Many are coming from the Tysons. I say Tysons. I mean that general direction from either the neighborhoods across the street, but they cut through and they're walking over to the metro, and they just cut right through the middle of campus and cut through the high school's campus and go straight through past the grad center, and that's where they go rather than walking down to the intersection of Haycock, because obviously it is a time saver. But given the size of George Mason, the age of the building, all the angles that we have on every, so many wings added on, it just, it's a very big problem to keep the doors secure, locked, with kids sneak out, they prop doors open, and the staff is always, it's an ongoing battle to keep visitors from entering our building. The building also doesn't have a true front, so the visitors sometimes don't even know where the entrance is. We do, so they go to random doors, and if they find a door open, that's just where they go in. As much as we, do try to fight to keep those doors shut and locked.
And with respect to the Metro folks, I really wasn't aware of that. So how much will this add to them? Are people going to be making a really much longer walk then to get to the Metro?
Well, they're gonna, I don't know how long, I've never walked that around, but it's probably add another 5 or 6 minutes to their walk if they have to walk down the sidewalks.
And so there's not a way to go in the backside? You basically just go up to Haycock Road and come around?
There's a path along the back way on that road that comes out to 7.
Yeah, I guess they could walk around like the Metro Access Road. We're not cutting those areas off, we're just cutting our property off.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other council members?
I'll just comment. I seem to remember there were studies going back several years examining security, particularly at George Mason, because you wouldn't build a high school like that nowadays that is spread out with, I forget how many doors there are, but more than we could afford at the time to put reader cards on and secure, and even if you do that, people prop them open. The nice thing about a fence is it's something that surrounds the property, so regardless of what happens with the property, you still have that security in place with changes made to the building at some point, which is the longer-term solution of security for that building.
Thank you. Other council members? Okay. If I can have a motion, and then I'll open this up for public comment. Yeah, I need a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve TO 13-02 on second reading.
If I can get a second, please.
Second.
Mr. Duncan on the second. I'd like to open this item up for public comment. Not seeing any. Ms. Bouchard, did we have any written comments other than the ones you described earlier? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this for public comment. Council members, any comments on this before we take a vote? No comments? All right. Ms. Bouchard, if you read the roll, please.
On TO 1302, second reading, Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalin?
Yes.
Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Tarter?
Yes.
Mayor Burke?
Yes.
Thank you, council. The next item before you are the consent items. These are appointments. Ms. Berry, did you want to do those?
Ms. Berry, if you can do the report.
Appointments.
Yes, sorry.
Yes, the Appointments Committee is pleased to recommend the following slate to the City Council. That's a reappointment of Messrs. Studley and Krasner, and new applicants Dan Z. and Barry Boucher. I'll get to those specifically in a moment. As always, we were gratified by the participation of so many qualified candidates and look forward to the good work of these important committees. I believe that with these appointments, both the BZA and Planning Commission are at full capacity. I had an opportunity to attend the recent BZA meeting and was impressed by its smooth and professional conduct. Earlier, the Appointments Committee, responding to concerns expressed by citizens about the functioning of the BZA, invited citizen participation in our committee meeting, offering concerned citizens an opportunity to talk about the committee members and the chair. Regrettably, nobody showed up. We hope that if citizens do have continued concern about this or other citizen committees, they bring these concerns to any members of council for consideration. So to the council, the Appointments Committee puts forward the following slate. Howard Studley for the Board of Zoning Appeals for the term January 1, 2013 to December 31st, 2016. Brent Krasner, Board of Zoning Appeals, January 1, 2013 to December 31st, 2016. New applicants, Dan Z., Board of Zoning Appeals, January 1, 2013 to 12/31/2016, and Barry Bouchard to the EDA, Economic Development Authority, for the term December 1, 2009, 11/30/2013, the unexpired term.
Thank you. Any questions or requests to remove anything from the consent agenda? Okay, if I can get a motion for the consent items, please.
Okay.
If I can get a motion, please, to approve the
To approve the
consent
consent.
items.
I move to approve the consent items, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. If I can get a second?
Second.
Is Mr. Duncan on the second? If I can have the roll call?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
For the Dan Z's unexpired term, it seems to be exactly the same as the full term. What do we mean by unexpired?
That may be a typographical error.
You know, is it a different date, perhaps? That's all, just to clarify that.
Should we,
I think that may be a correct term, but why don't we move forward? Typo? So can we go ahead and just delete unexpired term?
It doesn't matter.
Either, I don't think it does.
What matters
Well, in
is the
case there was a
appointment of the
mistake. In case there was a mistake, Ron.
No, but but in terms of adopting this tonight, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It can just be deleted, those words.
Yeah.
It doesn't affect anything.
I think that's right.
Okay.
All right. If I can have the roll call, and if it's incorrect, if you can bring it back.
Just one question to Madam Chair. Thanks for your work on this. Do we still have an alternate position on the BZA? Or, I forget, at our last meeting, wasn't there discussion of one more seat that we wanted to fill? 5.
there may be, I'm a little dim,
Okay, well, just,
but no, thank you.
we'll get back to you on that.
Yes.
Anybody who wants to be on the BZA, you may still yet have a chance. Oh, okay. I just feel like we,
Thanks. Why don't we just give Kathy a minute?
okay. And while she's looking, thank you, congratulations for your hard work to get the EDA fully stocked now, first time since Mr. Tarter and I left, I believe. And yeah, I second your remarks about the BZA, good discussions with Mr. Studley and Mr. Krasner, very impressive citizen volunteers, and we talked about giving BZA members the opportunity for training down in Richmond, and that might involve some allocation of travel money and so forth, and I think we all agreed on the appointments committee that would be a good thing.
Mr. Duncan, thanks for raising that point. And while Kathy is looking at this, one question that did come up that Ms. Berry raised, as far as how the BZA process works, that folks normally get sworn in before they provide any testimony, or the applicant or any petitioners go. Is that a normal process for the BZA? Given that it's quasi-judicial in its function?
You know, it's been a while since I've been to a BZA meeting, Mr. Mayor, where they've sworn. I guess what I'm saying is I don't recall offhand whether they swear people in or not prior to their testimony, but I can certainly talk to Mr. Studley and the zoning administrator to answer.
Mr. Foster, they actually do. It's a joint.
A joint, yeah, or a mass swearing.
A mass swearing in.
Yes.
Pardon me, one other thing that Mr. Duncan did raise, and this is fair warning, Mr. Foster, that you in particular were fingered in an appropriate way for being someone who might provide some guidance to the BZA. They were interested in training, and they thought that perhaps you might be able to provide a moment of,
Certainly be happy to do that.
that'd be great.
I'll get in touch with Mr. Studley.
All right. Kathy?
Okay, on the BZA right now, we have Brent Krasner and Howard Studley their terms were expiring, and they have been reappointed. There is a vacancy for Justin Castillo, and that term ended on 12/31/12, which is why the next term is 01/13 through 12/31/16, which is Mr. Z. And then there is a vacancy for an alternate. That has not been filled, looks like.
The alternate has not been filled.
And it hasn't been filled since 12/31/10. So that one has been vacant for quite a while.
So does that,
So we still have a vacancy for an alternate on the BZA.
on the BZA?
We're still open for business on people who might be interested in the BZA, because the alternate on the BZA sits as a regular member and just doesn't vote if everybody else is there. Is that right? Yes.
That's right. All right. So I think we're good, right, Kathy?
So Mr. Zeid's term, as noted here, is correct. That is the correct term.
All right, great.
Any other questions?
No,
Just a very brief comment. I think we should try to fill the alternate if possible, because it sounds like they regularly have people absent.
yeah. So if we can have, as Veronica always does, if she can also put that out for advertisement.
She is very diligent about that.
Yeah. She's been very good about it.
I can
Trying to get us
guarantee
off
she's diligent about her boards and commissions. Does a great job. Would
All
you-
right, if I can have the roll call,
Okay, so
please.
we have a motion by Ms. Berry, seconded by Mr. Duncan, to adopt the consent items. Ms. Berry?
Yes.
Mr. Duncan?
Yes.
Mr. Kalin? I'm sorry, yes? Mr. Pepe?
Yes.
Mr. Tartar?
Yes.
Mayor Brook?
Yes,
Thank you, council.
thank you. Okay, we are on to council member comments. Council, any comments? Mr. Duncan?
I'd sent a note to the manager earlier today about the letter to the editor. It was in the news press a couple of weeks ago, I think, referring to traffic volumes on Broad Street. And the manager sent a note back to me saying that he would be able to round up some data on that. So I thank you for your response. I look forward to that information. Thanks.
Other council member comments?
I have one. if I could.
Mr. Tartar?
Can I ask the city manager, are there any plans to get any crosswalks across Broad Street? I mean, I thought there was going to be a traffic light up at, near, I can't remember, the Pennsylvania maybe?
Yes, we have funding for a stoplight at Pennsylvania Avenue, right at Panera, and that is in preliminary engineering right now, and we will be putting that out to bid very shortly, and I will get council a firmer timeline. I don't have it off the top of my head, but that should be coming soon.
So maybe in the next 6 months or so?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, other council member comments? Mr. Kalin?
I'm raising it now because I didn't want to extend the conversation on the budget amendment. But Mr. Sharp mentioned that the schools would be selecting the vendor. I don't understand why that would be the case. Everything else is fine, but why would the schools select the vendor, which is a technical question that the individual can actually undertake the assignment on the buses? That would seem to be, that would be someone else, but not the schools.
John or Wyatt?
You know, that's something we're going to look at very closely, Mr. Kalin. You know, I take the points that you just made. This is, as we've talked about, we're the first locality that's going to be doing this. And so, anyway, I mean, we'll come to a decision on that. You know, the one wrinkle here is, I mean, these are city schools buses that are going to be the ones getting the equipment placed onto them. And so that may, I'm speculating, that may be what Mr. Sharp was thinking of when he made that, you know, made that statement. But again, we'll look at that. We're going to make sure it's done right and in compliance with the Virginia procurement law.
Mr. Kalin?
This really wasn't a legal question. This was a question of who's got the expertise to make sure that the selection of the vendor is the best one. And I'm unclear that the schools would have a resident expertise. You know, it's the school's buses, and so fair enough. But I'm sure, you know, there are other things that have to be outsourced and whatever. There's mechanical work that may not be done, undertaken by the schools, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is a question of, because if this doesn't work properly, it's not going to do any good to anyone.
I guess I'm assuming, and others may be too, that given that the police department actually has to sign off on it, that they would be involved in the procurement process. At least one would hope.
That's correct. It's going to be a collaboration, but one of the things that the state code provisions call for the school division may contract with, the school division may install. And so that's the way the state approached it. But it will need to be done with the city police department. We need a uniformed officer to sign off on every citation, and we do have the experience with photo red. So however it works through technically is who the contract goes through. I do anticipate it will be, at minimum, a very close collaboration.
Yes, and what I would ask for is that the citations, that there be a note that they go to the school board. Since actually when we instituted Photo Red, I got a ton of mail of people complaining about it. So we can put Tony or Susan's name on the citations this go around. And I say that in jest, Tony. Mr. Kalin.
Why, I mean, we were told that this is the very first, so there can't be a state ordinance that affects this if we're the very first.
The enabling legislation. Yeah, the enabling authority does, as Mr. Shields indicated, expressly provide that the school board or the schools shall contract. And so when I mentioned earlier that we've got to make sure that we comply with state law, I mean, that's what's driving it.
But this is the first time. How could there be a state law existent if this is the first one that's being done? This is applying some other ordinances or some other laws. If we're the first one, how could it be explicitly state that? I don't mind this. I'm not arguing whether the school should be involved or not. The logic doesn't make any sense.
Can
we can talk after this.
We can talk offline.
Yeah, can we take this offline?
Again, my bottom line is, obviously, it has to be done in compliance with state law and state code, and so that's what we're going to be focusing on. That's the best I can give you.
Other council member comments? Ms. Berry.
I just wanted to inform the council that I attended several COG meetings this month. COG Climate and Energy and Environment Policy Committee, and which focused this month particularly on Maryland's Energy Futures Coalition developing a grid resiliency program, which described redundant programs in emergency communication, water, electricity in the wake of a number of regional natural disasters. And what I thought was interesting is that Princeton Township, obviously in Princeton, New Jersey, seemed to be a star example of energy redundancy and resiliency, which I thought was interesting. I also attended the Chesapeake Bay Policy Committee meeting, which focused on legislative updates in Maryland and Virginia and some, issues of regulatory flexibility. I was unable to attend the full meeting, so I'll have to rely on the minutes to inform council if there was anything else that came up. I also wanted, and perhaps Mr. Pepe wants to speak to this as well, but Ron and I, as members of the GovOps committee, met with the city manager and some consultants today to begin the process of a compensation policy review and new or newly defined rationale and philosophy for employee compensation. So we should have something to council by mid-February for review, and staff and consultants are working on a timeline through the summer on procedure and implementation. So, Mr. Pepe, did you?
No, that covered it pretty well.
That's it? Okay.
All right. Thank you. Other council member comments?
I saw a note about possible change in the budget schedule because of spring break. Is there any revision of the budget calendar?
I believe Mr. Shields still working on that. It was spring break and Passover, so both nights at least are out for me. It's council's call, but I would suggest that we not meet on Passover.
Just, people are always interested in the budget calendar. Can't tell them soon enough.
Mr. Shields, I take it you're still working on it?
Well, I think it needs to be a council discussion. I think that whole week we really can't avoid. The question, I think, would be whether, if the council wishes to reschedule its meeting for that Monday, its regular session that Monday, which is the first night of Passover, to a different night. If we moved it earlier, we might miss the spring break week altogether. But what I think we would naturally do is try to reschedule it on another date that week, if that's the council's pleasure.
Well, why don't we do this? Mr. Shields, if you can take a look at the calendar, why don't we see if we can do it the week prior, if that fits and is still doable for you. I know that it's truncated a little bit because of the school budget, the school's calendar on the budget. They're providing you, I believe, their budget a little bit later than we had anticipated. So I don't know if that's going to give you enough time if we do it the week before, but Thursday, the week before, may be an option. And if that's not workable, then we need to look for a date later, the week that it's currently scheduled for, like Wednesday or Thursday. Does that sound,
Got to get it done.
it's just got to get done, but.
Don't forget
to
give me some
So if we can try to aim for possibly that Thursday before, that way it's the week before spring break, and if that's not doable, then we'll shoot for the current week that it's on, the best that we can.
That's the 25th is the day you're talking about moving?
Well, one cautionary note is that I do think that the public expects the council to meet on the second and fourth Mondays. That is your pattern. That's what you adopt in your rules of procedure. The council has never rescheduled a meeting because of spring break before. The council has on time attempted to reschedule due to religious holidays, so I'm sure the community would be understanding of that. But there are some consequences to it, and if we have a meeting on Thursday, there will be a lot of people there may be some people who will complain and wonder why that's happening. And so that's just my experience on trying to move regular sessions in the past. But
All right. So if you can try to come up with some options why that would be very helpful. And for whatever it's worth, I think the 28th is out for me.
25th.
And council, while we're on this topic, do you folks know any particular dates that they're going to be out during that time period?
During the,
Yeah, I apologize. I'm taking a look at my calendar here.
I'm out. the
I'm here
18th
every
and
Monday
19th.
that month, but I'm out the rest of the weekdays, most of the weeks.
Okay.
I'm out. That's the work session. I'm out.
And I've got a conflict on the 28th.
I can do any time that week, the 25th.
So if we had to go that week,
Easter isn't early this year, too. Easter's the 31st.
yeah. So perhaps the 27th may be a possibility.
That
Okay.
Yep.
So, Mr. Shields, if you can work on that, you and I can have a conversation during the mayor's meeting on Wednesday about it, and then we'll get a note out to council to try to at least figure out a date. But it sounds like if the week before is absolutely not doable for the reasons we talked about, then perhaps the 27th is the night that we need to have the first reading. Okay. All right. And I apologize to the council about this. I had previously asked that all these dates be cross-referenced, and apparently we missed this one. All right, any other comments? If I can have a motion, and we also had a set of minutes from December 10th, 2012.
Mr. Mayor, I move approval of the minutes of the City Council meeting December 10th, 2012, with minor editorial corrections on line 66 and line 298 that I will give to the clerk.
Okay, if I can, anything else? Okay, if I can get a second, please.
Second.
It's Mr. Pepe on the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it.
It's okay. I also would like to offer the clerk some changes on line 164. That's it.
With also that amendment?
With that amendment.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The ayes have it. The minutes are adopted as amended. If I can get a motion to adjourn, please.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjourn.
If I can get a second? No. That's Mr. Callen on the second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.